how I view physical symptoms, is that they are communicating with us. So they're not a problem in and of themselves. They're communicating to us something that's out of balance or something that needs attention. And our womb communicates a lot to us as women. And when we start listening and realizing we can have a relationship with our womb, it might sound odd that you can do that.
Hi there. Welcome to the Aligned Living podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Galatly, and I'm super excited to have you join us. In these episodes, we're going to have some heart-to-heart conversations with experts, everyday wellness enthusiasts, and, well, anyone with a story to share about their journey towards a more balanced and harmonious life. Welcome to the Aligned Living podcast, where well-being meets wisdom, and the journey is just as important as the destination. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Aligned Living podcast. My name is Kathleen, and I am the host. So thank you if you are joining again for an episode, or welcome if you're here for the first time. Those of you who are listening or watching, you are in for a treat. I just remain as excited as I was from episode 1 all the way now to episode 24. And in fact, I feel like the conversations just get richer and deeper and more beautiful. Today we have the amazing Dr. Gauri Lowe with us. And I am beyond excited about this conversation. It is so in alignment with Aligned Living, and there's lots to talk about. So I am not going to take up too much time. I think we're going to jump right into this episode. Gauri, thank you so much for joining, for making the time, for being here. It is just an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm so excited for us to meet and to be having this conversation. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we always kind of start. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself, a little bit about where you are, where you're from, and then the question that I always love to ask, which is kind of how your upbringing or your childhood or your early teens or 20s perhaps brought you to an aha moment where you were like, okay, I'm seeing a bit of the path unfold. I know it's a loaded question, so start where you want and you can just let it kind of flow.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And it's really lovely to discover your podcasts and you. So thanks for inviting me on. It's funny how we love to share our stories. Eh? So thank you for asking. I grew up in Cape Town. First on the Atlantic board and then on the southern suburbs, and I did my schooling at a semi-private Jewish school in the high schools in the town area. And I think that did contribute a lot to what I knew I didn't want. And also maybe seeing my difference as a growing up teenager in a culture I didn't relate to at all. So questioned a lot of that, mostly the competitiveness and the materialism, I'd say. And then early on, I didn't really see it as an aha moment, but I just always loved plants. And I would spend a lot of time in the botanical gardens in Kirstenbosch. And, just in thinking back, that was definitely an aha moment because I realized that there was a God there. When I saw the diversity basically and the variety in the floral kingdom around, just looking at the colors, the pollination, the protection against predators, the survival mechanisms, maybe how to trap their food, how to trap the water. It was so perfect, and there was such a variety and the coordination was beyond a mechanism I had to call divine. Yeah, so that was how I came to maybe my more godly way. But it didn't kind of end there. So I also had some aha moments, which was just a knowing, and I can't explain it still. I think it's just a karmic thing to do medicine. So I had that longing, and I was, the disappointments with not getting in, made me look deeper into things, and I just reapplied, and then I got in. But I definitely had an aha moment when I dropped out after 1 year. And the real reason was because I realized medicine wasn't going to answer the seeking I had for getting to the root of healing. And at that time, I was spending a lot of time with traditional healers in the townships in Khayelitsha. So I kind of said that I wanted to take a break from medicine and look deeper into those traditional healing. But what happened in my first year of medicine was that this was a very significant aha moment, is I went to the mountains with a religious spiritual community for a retreat. It changed my life, and I ended up joining their ashram and dropping out of medicine actually to join the ashram and become a nun, basically, but like a Vedic nun, so almost like a Vedic or Buddhist monk, but a nun and not Buddhist. Hare Krishna. So that was a big thing. And I did it for 7 years. And then my aha moment came in the form of a heart message, which I could only explain because it didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I wanted to go back to medicine. So I had this pulling again and again, and and I went back to medicine. So because I've dispersed it with a bit of science, I managed to study botany till 2nd year, which was quite nice. And then in 3rd year medicine was the pivotal aha moment when my son was born. And it's like this. That's how I know, okay, I think that was quite a moment. And then I just can talk myself out of the way it comes up. He's 19, almost 19. So it's interesting. It just opens me up like that, because it opened me up like that. It was a very raw moment where all my natural and everything kind of purpose in medicine suddenly stopped and went into birth. And the reason was I planned a home birth, but I in the experience, it went all very well, and I was very fortunate to really have a smooth, quick birth. But my recollection was so powerful in remembering the connection that it gave me, really with like a raw power of Mother Earth, that it was so tangible. It was more tangible than this even. And so I keep falling back to that, because I felt like this is the experience every woman has at the opportunity of birth. And then I went back to my studies, and I went back to my clinical years, and I went back into the wards and the clinics, and I saw a very disturbing opposite. And that drove me into a lot of activism around maternity rights and human rights and birth, and a lot of exploring why is it so important, and why has it been so significant for me? And then it's kind of the story unraveled more.
Wow.
In this work, you always have aha moments all the time, but I think just leading up to it, that's my 20, and that took me to the end of my 20s. So I was an older student at that time also.
But just incredible that I think so many people, after maybe even getting the first letter of saying you didn't get in, and going like, okay, well, this might not be the path for me. It's really something that I've always wanted to do, but clearly, like, I'm not going to get in. And actually having that, like, not only just like perseverance, but the trust in the message, in the heart message, to be like, no, this is the road that I want to walk down. And I thought I asked you a loaded question and you gave me such a loaded answer. Like usually like there's like a clear segue, but I'm like there's so many things we could go into here. And I think let's kind of dive deep into it. You speak of going into from medicine and then having your son, and it really taking you into what a lot of the work you do now, which is womb wisdom, which is pregnancy, which is birth, and then especially postnatal and antenatal work that you're doing. I'd love for you to speak a little more to that in perhaps the context of the shift that you are maybe wishing for the world to see when it comes to where Western medicine has been and is right now, and the potential that you see for women going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's quite, specifically focused question. And I think I'll start in medical school. Now I'd had my son, and we had a few projects we could like self choose a topic and like a mini thesis. And so I chose to do, I can't remember the exact wording, something like the relevancy of home birth in community settings for low risk mothers. And I was just looking for any opportunity to attend home births at that point. And so I spent the month or so with my midwife, who was very prolific and very researched, specifically in infants and perinatal psychology. So I spent the month with her, and there was a lot of home births in that month, and then writing up that paper. So I came from that kind. Even though I was very active with first of all, it started off with like making lists of nurses' names and what they did and reporting that to the head of obstetrics and making meetings, and that didn't go anywhere. And then I went into, I think, the education part, so finding out more about what is happening in that process at that time, what is happening with the hormones, why is bonding important, why are certain things not okay to happen when a mom is pregnant or giving birth afterwards. And then I started sharing information about that. So what's happening at the time was Ricky Lake's Business of Being Born. And my very first thing was starting with a screening of that at my house. But, I've always been active in wanting to share the message, because it started before my son was born. I was having like complementary group talks in medical school with someone else so I was always that orientated. So with birth, it just became more focused on that. And I set up a few workshops, and what I could really lean into was that women needed support on a sharing level. And we needed to feel, well, like we know in circles now. So I started that. And that was the same time I think I was pregnant with my second son. And then I just carried on with that kind of sharing. And I think through that and supporting home births, I learned a lot about what's happening. I wouldn't even say on the ground level, I'd say in the heart level for the women. And I think because my communities in Garden Route are generally like more holistic and a bit more intentional. And then also we've lived between India and South Africa, and in India it was an international community, but doesn't necessarily mean everyone's on the same. Anyway, you start to see women like as a non-different in a sense. We realize we all have these bodies and we all have this physiology, and I linked, because of my experience, maybe I just linked it very closely to a physiological approach. So I think I went around a bit then, but in the end, in my most sound way, I would say that I support a physiological approach to birth, and I deepened into that. Let me get back on track with the question. So now how I bridge things. I spent a lot of time in my history working with home births with different women, and that, you know, every home birth brings its own healing or story or learning, you know, for everyone, including me. And so I've always maintained that very humble approach, because I feel very strongly about, well, what led me to feel more strongly about understanding maybe why I felt so strongly about it was the womb wisdom part. And that came later. And that made me, from the beginning, I'd wanted to establish like a sacred model of birth, like filling in the gaps where things are not taught or not understood. And the same goes for gynecology. So, you know, understanding the flow of hormones at labor is not taught sufficiently to us. Just basic etiquettes and so many things. So, and that takes you to a different level. It takes you into why are things not like that? And there's a certain imprinting that happens with midwifery training, with doctor training. So for me, everything has to go a little bit step back with layers. And even with my whole birth passion and postpartum passion, because I think that's a big gap in women's health that we recover from, became also when my cycle started coming back after my second baby. I knew I wasn't going to have more children, and I didn't plan to. Yeah, so my mind started working more with menstruation, and maybe because I'd gone through a lot of my work with birth, I don't know, I approached this in this whole womb wisdom way. And then life happens, and I think, honestly, I was propelled into my own inner journey, which did coincide, strangely enough, with another transition of like the menopause transition. But so my focus has been on bridging, and so just to bring it to current in terms of pregnancy, birth, and postnatal, what my focus has become now is really on the sovereignty. And, you know, we have these discussions with the clients also, that it's very important to me that a woman is connecting with her womb and her baby. And so I have a very different language almost of understanding birth, but I can speak the medical language. So that's where the bridging comes in. But I don't see it through the lens of protocols, because I'm not tied into anything. I'm tied into Mother Nature. And so the protocols don't mean anything to me when I can explain them in a way that makes physiological sense. So that's kind of where I come back to in my capacity of having the vision to just see both. And in that way, yeah, but I approach it from the womb wisdom way, which for me means sovereignty, that a woman can and must make her own choices over her womb, because she has been given a womb. That's all the criteria. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Yeah. But for us to claim that sovereignty and to claim that choice, and we unpack a whole lot of other things besides our blood pressure and our pulse and our fetal movements, which is only what's felt practically in a pregnancy. So my 3 caveats for pregnancy are nutrition, connecting with your baby, and coming out of your practitioners, your care providers, consultation, feeling good and confident and heard. That's kind of how I've changed it. Yeah.
I love that. And I would be very interested to hear, and I'm sure you will know more about this, and I know that it's very vastly different globally. What are the, I guess, the legalities in South Africa at the moment that are potentially taking away women's choice of the way in which she would prefer? I mean, we'll talk about birth now, for instance, the way in which that she, you know, would like to perform her birth or have her birth happen. What are the constructs and constraints that they are in place that you've perhaps found to be, you know, challenging?
Yeah, there's certain, well, first of all, unfortunately, there's a lot of mistruths and kind of thoughts imparted in women, which creates a lot of fear and doubt. And so when you follow the medical system, and there's a difference between private and state. And I like that because I was trained in state. We all have to be trained in state. And for me, it just shows like it clearly. It's like, but with private, it becomes more inculcated with medical legal claims. And that's so that's part of the challenges. It becomes a lot of red tape around things like things that don't make sense are said, like ultrasounds done later in pregnancy and then finding a problem. Oh, baby's head is big, or cord is around the neck. So impregnating thoughts like that. So in that sense, I've also grown to see it as the market and the supplier. So there's two parts, and we have to be clear also about what we want and making that known more and not being so passive. But the passivity comes from a lot of reasons, so it's not so clear like that. And sometimes we are confined by medical aids for practitioners, and then practitioners will have their own personal ways, and some will cut more, and some will say they don't cut, but then they cut. And you see women who are kind of just misguided and realize a lot of times afterwards that, oh, actually how it went wasn't actually how it needed to go, and not even necessarily how it should have gone. But the legalities come in meeting something like that, even in your first pregnancy. And then when you have your second pregnancy, working through the iatrogenic, often the medically induced complication that not necessarily had to have happened if we had understood how to support physiological birth. So that might come in the sense of, you might want to try for a VBAC or vaginal birth after cesarean, and then you are confined to doing it in the hospital, which is a very unconducive way of supporting a physiological birth. So these discussions kind of almost have to happen now on individual levels as we interface with care providers. And maybe I could just talk more in towards a dream that there's a place, there's a place that we don't want to be all competing. And I don't know any other doctors that do home births besides the famous one in America, Dr. Stu. So I don't have any frameworks to fall on for me. So I just keep it neat and communicative and honest and clear, because that's what I can do. So yeah. So what I would dream is that we have, there's like a role overlap. So when there's something naturally in a pregnancy or in a labor that needs intervention, or I need to consult higher, then I have the space for that, but not necessarily that somebody has to consult at that high level automatically. So that is really just, and I think medical aids would even prefer that. Many of them are swapping over to GPs, doing more of the gynae things. But I think obstetrics remains such a high litigation that it's just very cultural to have your gynae and go with your gynae and not question it at all. Most people wouldn't think that there's something to question. And that's kind of the state of, yeah. So it's hard right now. The communication's hard, the fear is up, and it's almost like you're on the defensive when you're doing a home birth. There's no interest or curiosity into how is it practiced, what do you take, what are the safety measures, who's your accountability, what's your, there's no questions about it. There's a lot of assumptions around home birth.
Definitely. I mean, I think every time, because I've always been drawn to that, and I don't have babies yet. And I appreciate that you said earlier, low risk pregnancies, you get low risk pregnancies, you get high risk pregnancies. And that's what I really enjoy speaking to you, or why I enjoy speaking to you about this, is because you do have that array of knowledge. You've been in the hospitals, you've seen the things, you've done the births, you know how this works, and that sometimes if you have a low risk pregnancy, it might actually be perfectly fine for you to do a home birth. But there is, and I see it a lot in a lot of people that I speak to, and women, but particularly, actually, interestingly enough, the women's parents and the women's partners, who are just so fearful of things going wrong, that it's almost like the woman just gets told by the parents and the partner that this, you can't do this, like, even though you want to do this, like, it seems like a cool hippie, like, free spirit idea to, whatever, do your birth at home, but actually it's like the most selfish thing you can do, because what if something happens to the baby, or what if something happens to you? And it's, it's not dismissing the fear, or dismissing the worry, or dismissing the concern, but I think that there are so many amazing birth facilitators, doulas, gynaes, doctors, who have done the work now, who can actually hold those safe spaces. And then probably a bit of a controversial question on this, but I'd love to hear, and again, it's not saying they are not, that they aren't really amazing, great male gynecologists, but what is your take on a female gynecologist working with a woman versus a male gynecologist? Because I have friends who only go to male gynecologists, and they don't even want to go to a woman gynecologist. And for me personally, I can almost not think of like anything worse of like not going to a woman about my woman body. And again, I'm sure you get gynecologists, male doctors, who are just, excellent and super high IQ levels, and they've seen it all, they've done it all. But to me, there's almost like a little link missing there. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, the missing link is they don't have a vagina, just to jump right in there. So they cannot have a personal experience of it unless they've done past life therapy. So no matter what, that's just a fact. But I think I'm going to answer this in quite a deep way, because of what the discussion leading up to that question brought up for me. And it's the issue specifically around the trust and our body. What you were saying, that you see a lot of relatives saying to a woman who expresses that she wants a home birth and is put a lot of fear in. And it's hard to feel that sometimes there isn't an agenda. Because what if we actually trusted the woman deeply, so deeply we had ceremonies to trust her, or we had a beautiful woman exchange to say, I trust you, the child has landed in your womb for a reason, this is your journey, and you can do it, I trust you, I honor you, and you puff her up, and then she takes forth, and she has and she makes her decision, and however it is, she's responsible for it. It's just, there's a lot of deaths and bad, awful things that happen in hospitals. So it just doesn't hold true that it only happens at home births, which is something we also don't see. So what if we trusted that? And what if we didn't always kind of try and program into a woman that she had to find the answer outside of herself? So if something's wrong, she had to go to someone else to balance her hormones, or she had to go to someone else to read the blood test, or she had to, it's always going outside to fix it. Well, that's just consumerism. Medicine is consumer based. But what if we actually told women, and reminded ourselves that you can make your decision, and we step back and we do that? And that's, for me, kind of where the trust builds, and that for me is where the healing has to come in for a woman to retrust herself, to claim back the birth she wants, whether she wants a cesarean or a VBAC or a trial of labor or free birth or whatever. This or cesarean, the whole topic has a kind of keeps me humble, because it's not about me. It's not about the mom. It's not about the baby even. It is a lot about the baby. But it's actually just more about the baby and the communication with a much higher divine force. And no matter how much we try to micromanage in a hospital or not, what's going to happen is going to happen. And in my capacity, I have, I'm not going to not stop someone or say something if I think something is dangerous, but the discussion and the choice is the mother's. And then if they, in the same breath, if somebody chooses a male gynae, it's really just a choice, because we're not looking, you're not even looking at where you're giving birth. You're looking at how you feel. And we want you to feel safe and safe and in a loving environment and all those things, because they make the contractions work, because they make for a safer birth, because they're going to keep you out of your adrenaline. So it's physiologically based, also happens, but if you have a home situation that is not conducive, if you have just many things you can think of, and you'll find another way to give birth center birth, or a friend's home, or an Airbnb, or a hospital might feel safest for you. And you make that choice. So it's not really about, but it's, for me, the male gynae and the woman gynae, you must remember also, I was a nun for 7 years. I was deeply chaste and celibate and covered myself in a sari. And I have a very holy, sacred view of our body. I really have a view of our body as a divine temple. And I'm very discerning and intentional about what I put on, what I eat, and what I put in anywhere. So I would say the same, even if it is an ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound, or if it is somebody examining, or a pap smear, or a liver, or a yoni egg, or sponge, menstrual things also. Just so that would be in how comfortable do I feel, and that is for someone to ask themselves, and to honestly show up for where they need to be themselves, and not betray because of fear or being forced. That causes a very difficult wound of healing betrayal to ourselves for not listening to our inner voice. And that comes out as physical symptoms.
Take a breather and explore the Aligned Living on-demand video library, along with our exclusive membership perks. Plus, our YouTube channel is already up and running, offering even more wellness content. Your path to holistic living is just one click away. Visit our website to learn more. And now, let's return to our inspiring discussion. I would love for you to continue a little bit.
How I view physical symptoms is that they are communicating with us. So they're not a problem in and of themselves. They're communicating to us something that's out of balance, or something that needs attention. And our womb communicates a lot to us as women. And when we start listening and realizing we can have a relationship with our womb, it might sound odd that you can do that. Why? Because the conditioning started, yes, with maybe our own birth and what, the imprinting and psychology that happened around that. But it also carries on into our biology textbooks and how we've been taught about our bodies, and menstrual cycle, fertility cycle is very, it's still not feminine based. So we need to really restart that. Then you can allow yourself to even realize we can have a relationship with our own womb. It doesn't belong to anyone else. And actually it communicates to us in our own favor. So it might feel like a lag or a heavy period or a pain or an issue, but it's actually kind of nudging us before something becomes bigger. Just start listening. And when you start listening, you actually receive from it. So, and it might take a little while, but you realize there's a relationship of a communication and you can understand yourself better. And then what language does the womb talk if you're talking about this communication? And I'd say it talks in symptoms and in how you're feeling, like emotionally and mentally. But we also understand that the womb is, they call it the lower brain or the heart. That the womb is also a heart brain. And so we have like cognition and sense and intellect. And then over here we have heart and emotion and intuition. And we also have maybe more in our gut, we have more of the instinct. But our womb also has something. So womb wisdom is what I've brought into it. And the journey that put me into womb wisdom, it was a very specific event that took place that made me realize I'm on a whole kind of trip here. And make sense of my last few years. And then COVID came and it was deepening into the sense of what maybe all our symptoms are yearning for is connection. We're looking for that connection. And why are we looking for that connection? Yeah, it's because of the time maybe when we were in our pregnancy, in our own coming into our own birth body, when our mother was pregnant with us, and how was that for her, and how was she connecting, and what was happening around her then, and what was she being told, and how was your birth, and did you have that time afterwards with your mother? And so we really start with that because we see milestones actually in our emotional milestones that are met from when we are still in the womb, and that talks into the trust and connection. And so that's why I love the womb work, is because we actively work on those levels with babies. and actually, that was the first thing I did in 2014 when I had finished all my internship in ComServe. And I was like, okay, what's the best way I can support mothers now? Because it was also an opportunity. You go into your diplomas then after medicine but I didn't want to do a diploma because I didn't think it in obstetrics, because I didn't think it would feed the way I wanted to serve. So I did a course called a Sula course, which was a soul integration course, a 3-week, full 3-week course, helping to connect, going through a whole meditation process to connect moms with their unborn babies in their womb. And I thought that's the most powerful thing I can do at that point. So I've got little tools like that I've gathered. You're welcome to ask. To stop and ask. Otherwise I'm just going to go on.
I mean,
because that connection thing was a big thing for me. And then with COVID, I saw, this is not going in a great way. We're all going to connect like this, which does have an amazing part, but it's not fulfilling for us tactile, sensual beings. And I realized this is going to cause havoc. Everyone's childhood traumas is going to get triggered. And it did, I think. And now we're all trying to 2024 kind of gather all our pieces together and start on a new foundation. That's really what it feels like.
I was about to say that's literally what it feels like. I know for me personally, I not only, we had the lockdown and everything, but I had left my home, my shala, where I had like managed the space and taught yoga there for 5 years, moved to a different town on a farm, thinking I'm going to have the whole harmonious community that I'm going to, get into. And then there was none of that. And I was just online and built a very big online community, which has been amazing. And, like you said, like I get to have amazing conversations with humans like you when, like online. But I did notice and feel it a lot when I went to Retreat Yourself just outside of Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and seeing so many people in person for the first time in years, seeing people for the first time that I'd never met, but I'd had intimate conversations with them, whether it be on Zoom or whatever the case might be. And there is just no substitute for that human connection, in person thing. So that was also like a very, very big thing for me. But I want to also not digress. I want to track back, when you were saying how you've collected all these different tools. And I know one of the tools that you use is nature and plants.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to share a little bit about that, in perhaps how it has served you personally, and maybe a little bit about where I know you said that you studied in your second year, and how you use that to support your clients.
Yeah, it grew from there. So, when I did 2 years of science, I just did botany in those 2 years. Dit was ook 'n botany by Stellenbosch. So I learned all my plant parts in Afrikaans.
Oh my goodness.
And then I was always just naturally, as I said in the beginning with Kirstenbosch, I always loved looking at plants for healing. And then with the African, I think the traditional African herbs was where I first started. Oh, I've had a deep love. It started off with me actually specifically around, I named it psychophytopharmacology. So it was the pharmacology, kind of really understanding the chemical processes, the organic chemical processes that were happening within someone's mind or brain when they're using plants. That worked for St. John's wort and also a lot of other traditional and indigenous herbs around that time in the 90s. And now that's advanced much more. I'm coming back to it actually, but I did Aviva Rum's course. Aviva Rum is a well-known midwife, doctor, herbalist. So I felt a lot of connection with her, and she was having a course, Botanical Medicine for Women, Women's Health. So I did that, where you learn to, as a provider. And that was like 2012 to 2016. And that gave me a lot of confidence. That did, like, I think a lot more people are gaining more confidence now because herbs are very easy in that sense. But it gave me confidence to play and to bring in my own teas and herbals. And that's where I really love to be. So I would love just using the whole plants in a tea or in a smell. My husband also makes indigenous incense and homemade incense. So we have those things around us all the time. And if we're in India, we use Indian stuff. And if we're in Africa, we use African stuff. And I love that. I'd walk in, the first thing I do when I come to a new place is like meet the garden. I just you just walk through the garden and you kind of meet these inhabitants that hold the space. So I always do that. And I find from that comes more of a relationship, So what happened with the botanical medicine course is I remember very specifically thinking, I'm going to go and sit next to a plant and just kind of say what I'm feeling that the plant is necessary for. And I did that with yarrow, and it was very lovely. And then I was searching more for that part. So there's not just the chemical components of the plants. And then I'm sure many of your listeners may know the evolutionary herbalism and Saja Popham in America. So he has a whole different approach to herbalism, which focuses more on, I guess, traditional methods of approaching plant medicine with Chinese and Ayurveda. So it's looking more at the properties of the plants and the elements. Now, this syncs very much with more of a womb wisdom approach as well, because we understand the elements hold physical and kind of emotional, spiritual dimension and qualities that they can bring in. And that's things just kind of dropped like that, in a sense, very deeply around postpartum. And I saw a whole management to postpartum from the elemental aspect, and that translated into practical understandings of the herbs. So the elements get used through the herbs. So I could almost see a language coming from up from the universe, the solar, and a language that also has effects on us and also has ways to heal us. Like in a full moon, there's just certain ways you'll feel and there's certain emotions, and you can tap into that at the time, or an equinox, and you will get healing. You can go into it very deeply. But so like the cosmos has those energies at different times, and if it's a full moon in Aries, then maybe it feels more fiery, especially if it connects to something in your chart. So you can see the same through plants. And I started seeing that healing on that elemental level. So you would look at a plant and you would also understand that it's got chemicals that are necessary because they will interact with that in your body. But then you also see, oh, it has a property that's heating. Or, oh, with its heating, it's also drying. Or actually, that's a plant that moistens you and soothes you. So actually, using that in a tea to soothe your throat is also helpful. And you understand it on different levels, and you also look at the plants and you understand the energy. So I started just doing more of that and loving that as a different language, just different language. So I kind of bring all of that now into a practical. Well, what happened during COVID is I also went online and I started teaching. So I've got courses that teach the botanicals for mothers or for providers or for birth keepers or whatever your role is, really, because I don't believe there's an exclusion if you want to. Yeah. So, and then what also happened is I held workshops. So I always just have this feeling to connect locally, actually, and teach wherever I go. So in India, I have circles, I taught midwifery. And here I also have some workshops. And about 5 years ago, I had a workshop making a balm that I was trying out. And I called it Yoni Balm. And
I saw it.
It's overfilled with like 25 people, mostly perimenopause, and mostly around issues of like dry vagina. So I had created it as a postpartum healing balm. So that was really great, and then made it into a product. Yeah. And that's nice and exciting, and I'm kind of ready to make part 2 now also. Yeah. Yeah, so that's how it's translated. Otherwise, I bring it into the rituals with heat, with pregnancy, and also in, if I have a private consultation, then I'll always have a feedback on what botanicals could be useful.
Quick little question. What's your, I know you probably can't have a favorite. So what is one of your favorite plant allies that you work with for yourself?
Motherwort, I would say, is the one that comes to mind. Motherwort is a herb that, you see, when you start working with the herbs, you also get very personal with them. So you want to say, I met her in America, because when you meet them personally, it's so much lovely. Yeah. They don't grow, it doesn't grow. I haven't grown it in South Africa. But motherwort is quite a prickly plant. And she's very soothing on our anxiety, actually, in terms of, like, if we have heart palpitations, or if we have a stress of making us feel like that, or if we are feeling run down and we need a sense of mothering. The Latin name is Leonoris cardiaca, which is the heart of a lion. Lion-hearted, courage, Sure. And yeah, so I bring it into my postpartum tinctures or teas. It's a little bit bitter, so then I would also suggest a tincture. And it also acts on the womb in bringing circulation. So it's nice to use the leaves for steams, for yoni steams, or as a tea to bring on a menstruation or to help with postpartum cramps. That's the one that's come to mind because of the mothering part.
And I would love for you to chat a little bit. I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to squeeze the last little bit of info out here. Please share a little bit about yoni steams and what that entails for perhaps anyone who's listening who has not
Get it.
heard about it.
You can get it. Sorry about that. Yes, yoni steams is something I kind of also fell in love with. So basically, you make a tea of the herbs, and you use different herbs that you can choose for their chemical actions or for their elemental actions, and you'll often see there'll be an overlap. So it's something that has become very, very much more practiced, I think, mostly since Steamy Chick did a lot of work around it and started getting good results, and then did a lot more research, and then found how it's such a universal practice. So universal meaning it's practiced in like South American, in Native Indian, in Asian Indian, in other Asian, and in like Morocco and and in Africa. So I have a funny story. Once I was chatting to the security guard at the clinic was a Sangoma. And so I was chatting to him about the steams. And I said, do you know it's in your medicine and in your culture? So he said, yes, we use hoshit. Hoshit. I didn't understand the accent. So I'm just trying to say how I couldn't understand it. Maybe he didn't say it like that. But anyway, it's hosmania.
Oh my goodness.
So I figured that the hosmania, yeah. So I work from India, we work a lot with cow manure, but I hadn't heard about this. But just as an example that it's so universal.
It's so, and everyone's got their own little, like their own medicine that they choose.
And it might be even the herbs or the grass that has gone through the horse's system.
Yeah.
But I like to practice it because I feel there is the healing part that helps a lot with menstrual irregularities and heaviness, or even fibroids or things like that. So what happens, I think, is the relationship thing, that when we actually give our yoni, our vagina or womb that attention, it starts to receive it, and things become more clear to us in a different way of what we might need to do next in our healing journey, which we hadn't thought of before. And the more we kind of feed that relationship, you see almost like there's something else that happens in the in our body and in our communication with it. So the steaming opens up, I think, things much more than just the physical healing, but the physical healing and the warmth and the nourishment of the herbs in that way through the water. And I did once ask many years ago, I actually asked Aviva Ram about it. And she said that you must be careful of not burning yourself. But I find that women do that quite well.
The logic steps in.
If it hurts, don't push through the burn.
Don't push through the burn. No.
So I kind of like thought, okay, but yeah. So it's very subtle. But I dreamed, I opened a practice in 2018, and I dreamed that I was a bit before my time, still maybe. So I like bought 4 yoni steaming chairs as my first had to haves in my practice. And I dreamed of doing like steaming circles, but we haven't got there yet.
I mean,
and I found better chairs.
Sign me up when the circles start.
Yeah, I think the conversations there could be really fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Intimacy on a different level. What does living an aligned life feel like to you, or look like to you, or what does living in alignment mean to you?
I like the word. I think to me it means living in alignment with your purpose. Sounds a little bit corny, but with what supports you to work within your purpose. Yeah. And that it's quite a high bar in a sense. So I would almost like to add in also with a very healthy dose of gentle mothering, self-mothering, and just gentle compassion. Because otherwise we can tend to go more on the yogi side, and it's easy for us to kind of wake up early, but we also need to really chill out and have fun while we're doing it. Yeah.
I think that might be one of my favorite answers to that question yet. Oh, thank you. I love that so much. I just finished a 4-week online cleanse course with 24 women, and it's so interesting to observe how we can get into that doing the work, and how it becomes this work thing, and by doing the things that are good for us, we actually end up having less tolerance for ourselves, and less patience, and less kindness, and less forgiveness, instead of having the work be a little bit of a challenge that is having us nudge our boundaries of change, and using it as an opportunity to really hold ourselves and go okay, cool, we're moving through this thing, but I've got you, I'm holding you. And so I really love that you said that, and also just bringing in some fun, man. Life can be so serious, life can be so hard, and we really can lose our playfulness, and our expressiveness and creativeness in really just living.
Yeah. And what gives us joy.
It gives us joy. Oh, Gauri, thank you so much. Where and how do people get in touch with you?
Thanks. My website's drgaurilowe.com, DrGaurilowe.com, and it's the same on Instagram and Facebook. Gauri Lowe, I think _MD, or yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, Garden Roots, but online. Yeah.
We'll put all the information in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. It is my favorite to come back and listen to these conversations. A lot of the time I just fast forward when I'm speaking, but then to re-listen, because I'm so in it now, but then to sit back and reflect and hear all the information. I feel like you've dropped some really, really key points, and some very just fundamental awareness. It's what I've really felt in this conversation, is this fundamental awareness of, like you said, there's this unlayering and this stepping back, and almost just stepping inwards, and really attuning to that, whether it is how do I want to give birth, whether it is who do I want to be my gynae, whether it is who am I in circle, or what circle am I in, and understanding that there is that choice to be made, and that you and your womb have that choice, your womb and yourself have that choice, to make those decisions, hopefully. I mean, I know the world is a difficult place, and that is not always the case for all women. But if you are listening to this podcast, potentially you do, and this is a reminder that you do. And so if you have any questions around any of this, please click on the links, reach out to either of us. I say this at the end of every episode: there's no such thing as a stupid question. In fact, this is what we live and breathe and love to do. So please feel free to reach out. And if you enjoyed this, share, subscribe, comment if you have any questions, and especially share this episode with anyone you feel might benefit from it. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Gauri, for joining us today. It was honestly just the best. My mind is blown in the best way.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And see you at episode 25. Lots of love. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Aligned Living Podcast. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a fresh perspective on your journey towards holistic well-being. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, your feedback fuels our mission to bring you valuable content that aligns with your life. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, and feel free to reach out with your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future episodes. We would love to hear from you. But until next time, take good care of yourself, embrace the present moment, and remember, you are your own healer. Thank you for being a part of our community. Goodbye for now.